When I was about 3 or 4 years into being a therapist, I got an individual to work with. We'll call her Sarah, definitely not her real name. She was a 38-year-old single mother who entered therapy complaining of chronic pain and all the issues that go with chronic pain. Side note here, if you are still kicking around niches to go into in therapy, chronic pain is an area where people are really needed to support individuals that are suffering, and they just don't seem to have the resources. Anyway, that was a quick little side. But this individual, she'd go to just this line of doctor's appointments on a pretty regular basis. Her sleep was interrupted by her chronic pain, so she was constantly fatigued. She would describe life like she was just draped by a heavy blanket, and that, like, the symptoms that she was constantly dealing with were really blunting her ability to enjoy her world. However, the more we got into the sessions, the more they progressed, and that trust was really established between myself and Sarah. We began to peel back these layers of the experiences in her life, and she started to talk of this like haunting senses of emotional emptiness, and described feelings of just disconnection from her world, from her family, from her friends, from herself at times. She recounted a lifetime of relationships that were passionate but fleeting, and they would often end in this whirlwind of conflict that left her feeling just really destabilized and alone. Emotionally, Sarah's landscape seemed to be like a tumultuous sea. She would kind of oscillate between these waves of euphoria, really high, and then these crashing lows, sometimes within a span of just a few hours. So mood swings were a big part of her world, and they would wreak havoc on her sense of stability. In these moments of euphoria, she felt invincible, yet those feelings could swiftly dissolve into a chasm of despair that was really difficult for her to get out of. She talked about tendencies toward impulsive decisions, and this often led her to some pretty bad moments in her world, where she connected with pretty unsavory individuals. So initially, this intersection of her physical distress and emotional turmoil presented as a pretty complex puzzle, making it difficult to discern whether her challenges stemmed from depression or anxiety, maybe some unresolved trauma. But the more we got into Sarah's world, the clearer this picture emerged that these symptoms were indicative of borderline personality disorder, which is really a misunderstood diagnosis for a lot of individuals. But we never would have come to that place without that connection that was developed, that sense of really giving Sarah a place where she felt safe and that she can be heard. And that's really at the heart of a good case conceptualization. It's not just hearing a bunch of things from an individual and then making a judgment or making a decision about what they're dealing with and who they are, but it's really about connecting with them and getting to that deeper level of what is going on here, that I can help them develop a plan toward a better life. Welcome to the Licensure Lifeline podcast. This is your host, Matt Lawson, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the art of case conceptualization. Mastering case conceptualization is one of those things as a therapist that is just a really important tool to have in our toolbox. And it's all about connection, as I was alluding to in the little vignette I went through at the beginning of this episode. But before we get started, just a reminder that you can also follow the show on Instagram. I also will be opening up a Blue Sky account as well, where you can follow me there for information about the podcast, episodes that are coming up, episodes that are being released, and I occasionally put flashcards and other little tips and tricks to help you study better for the test. Please don't forget to review the podcast wherever you listen to this. It's just going to help other people find this podcast better and help them study for the test. All right, let's get back to Sarah. So, with a case like Sarah, we're going to be starting with the presenting problem. And when she comes into the office, she is initially talking about the symptoms that she deals with when it comes to chronic pain, how it's keeping her up at night, how it's just muddying her ability to be in her world and be effective and optimized. And this is what she is presenting when we first meet her. What the presenting issue is. Again, these tests do not tend to throw curveballs at people. Still, it is important to really read and oftentimes read between the lines when it comes to what is being presented. And this case of Sarah is a perfect example of being able to read between the lines. Because I went, as I talked to her a bit more, and as she told me her story a bit more, other things started to come out that went along with some of the things that she was talking about when it came to her chronic pain, but it also started to tell a different story. On the test, you will be able to take little notes. I, from what I remember, I think they even give you like some pieces of paper that you can take little notes on, especially for the computerized test. So you will be able to like pull out things like sleep disturbance, difficulty concentrating, difficulty with relationships, things like that. You also want to briefly go into this individual's history, right? One of the things with Sarah is we talked about some of her past relationships. What were those like? She alluded to that. They were could be pretty intense, but also pretty fleeting. That she really hadn't had a long term relationship that lasted more than like 3 or 4 months, I believe. When she was talking about her history, she also brought up mood swings and how from when she was pretty young, um, late teens, that mood swings were a big part of her persona, who she was. That this was often something that she was called out for. Right, she was this moody individual. Now, keep in mind that as I say this in my head, I'm thinking, oh, anybody that thinks that they're moody thinks that they could potentially be have borderline personality disorder, and that's just not the case. We always kind of look for these clinical understandings when people are talking about the moodiness, and that also makes you keep in mind too that if somebody brings up moodiness, if that's not congruent with other things that would put them in a place of, let's say, a diagnosis for borderline personality disorder, you have to keep this in mind. So there is this constant organization of thoughts as you are working with somebody, as you're talking to them, as you're putting the pieces of the puzzle together to figure out how you can best support them and what plan of action will be best for this individual based on what they are presenting to you. Another area that kind of piggybacks off history a lot of the times is the person's cultural or social context. There wasn't too much here with Sarah that she went into about her cultural or social context, other than talking about some of the relationships she's had, talking about some of the friendships that she's had that could that ended oftentimes in pretty pretty dramatic way. But Sarah is a 38-year-old white female, and it would be worth talking about some of the things that she has dealt with in her life as a white female, in her workplace, in um, her community, things that potentially have come up, that would just be important to note. Now, I'm going to pull a page here from the positive psychology stuff that I talked about, I think a couple of episodes ago. We also want to look at Sarah's strengths and resources. Like the things that she's talking about. What are her strengths? What are the positive things in her life? What are the things that she can lean into to help her do the work necessary toward improving her world? And, she was middle of the road income. She is a single mother, um, and she does have a larger family that is very supportive. She does have a circle of friends that seem to come in and out of her life, but she does like to socialize. She's also just a pretty bubbly individual for the most part. She's fun to talk to. And again, just a reminder that we're not looking for what is broken in people, right? We are looking for the aspects of them that work with their world and maybe also that don't work the greatest within their world. So it's not just about finding what's broken with the person, but looking at their strength, looking at their resources, looking at what they have, what they bring to the table that will best support their needs. Okay, so we have a lot of information here, and now we take this all and we ball it up, and we're starting to get closer to diagnosis. But first, what theoretical lens are we going to be looking through in order to understand a treatment plan, and understand how we're going to work with Sarah? For this case, I went with DBT, Marshall Linehan, dialectical behavior therapy. Highly recommend looking up DBT. I think I've done at least one episode on it. I'll probably do another one. I'm a big fan of DBT, but it was originally developed for borderline personality disorder, and it's part of the cognitive behavioral suite of therapeutic approaches, and that's really effective in helping people with borderline personality disorder better navigate their world. So after picking my therapeutic approach to use to work on with Sarah, is going to allow some foundational work even in the first couple of sessions, just around like, okay, let's start to establish things based on this theory. So everything that I have talked about here leads to a diagnosis. And I'm not a huge fan of diagnosing, and this is controversial within the therapeutic world. The way I see diagnosis is it allows therapists to speak to other therapists about a group of symptoms that they are seeing within an individual, that allows for like a shorthand description of what they're seeing. Um, Insurance companies need diagnoses in order to approve benefits. So we are pretty forced into diagnosis in our therapeutic world. The problem that I have with diagnoses is people will oftentimes hitch on to a diagnosis that they are given, and it becomes their identity. And I really struggle with that when I meet somebody that has had therapy before, and I'm like, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. And the first thing they say is, I'm borderline personality, or I'm a depressive with anxious thoughts, you know, and it's like that's who they've become, because they've been told by somebody else down the line that this is who they are. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do this, that you shouldn't just tell people, but understand the ramifications for what it means to give someone a diagnosis, um, and be able to talk about it with them and be able to say, like, this isn't who you are, but based on what I'm seeing, based on the symptoms that you are sharing with me, this is what most closely describes, and again, kind of like gives you a shorthand to talk to other clinicians about what you are saying. But this isn't about who you are as a person. Okay, let's go into some questions that we might see on the test that relate to a vignette like this. So, first up, what additional information would be most important to gather during the initial session? A detailed history of Sarah's childhood experiences. B, the frequency and impact of alcohol use. C, a full medical history to rule out any other physiological causes of her symptoms. Or D, information about her work environment and support system. Answer here is going to be D. Like I said, she did go over a little bit about her um, work environment, a little bit about a work environment, but it might be helpful to go a little bit deeper into how the symptoms are impacting her work. Question number 2. Which symptom best supports a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder? Would it be A, chronic fatigue and trouble concentrating, B, a history of intense and unstable relationships, C, impulsivity limited to financial decisions, or D, persistent feelings of emptiness over several months? The answer here is going to be B. One of the hallmarks of borderline personality disorder is a pattern of intense and unstable relationships. This is often characterized by extreme shifts in feelings toward others. I don't know if you've ever worked with anybody or had anybody in your life with borderline personality disorder, but it really can be a situation oftentimes where they can be very hot or very cold towards you. I have worked with probably a half a dozen individuals that have had borderline personality disorder, and you do. Like, they can oftentimes very quickly come to a place of, you are one of the greatest people in the world for me. And then sometimes something happens between session and the next session comes in, and they wonder why you're even seeing them, because you're not really helping them at all. So you can see that pretty quick turn between warm and cold toward individuals in somebody that had borderline personality's life. Question 3. What would be the most appropriate immediate focus in Sarah's treatment plan? Would it be A, exploring past traumas and unresolved conflicts, B, developing skills to manage impulsive behaviors, C, referring Sarah to a full medical evaluation to rule out physical causes, or D, encouraging Sarah to rebuild broken relationships with her support system? The answer here is going to be B, developing skills to manage impulsive behaviors. Addressing impulsivity is a crucial step in the treatment of BPD. By helping Sarah develop these skills through things like dialectical behavior therapy, the therapist can help her to reduce the immediate risk in her life and improve emotional regulation. Question number 4. If Sarah were to disclose that she frequently feels abandoned by friends and family, what would be the best therapeutic approach? A, normalize Sarah's feelings and provide reassurance. B, challenge Sarah's beliefs that others are abandoning her. C, help Sarah to identify patterns in her relationships that may contribute to this feeling. Or D, refer Sarah for family therapy to address relationship issues. The answer here is going to be C, help Sarah identify patterns in her relationships that may contribute to this feeling. A core component of treating BPD is helping clients understand how their behavior and thought patterns influence their experiences. So, identifying these patterns and fostering insights empowers Sarah to make meaningful changes. All right, that is going to be it for the questions. Let's go into some resources that you guys might be able to benefit from to help you better case conceptualize. First up, let's go through some books. First book, Case Conceptualization, Mastering This Competency with Ease and Confidence by Len Sperry. This is a comprehensive guide to creating effective case formulations across different theoretical approaches. Also, The Art and Science of Case Conceptualization by Nancy McWilliams. This one is leans more psychodynamic, but it provides a universal and applicable insight into the case conceptualization process in general. Um, One more book, Clinical Case Formulations, Matching the Integrative Treatment Plan to the Client. This one's by Barbara Lyncher Ingram, and it's a practical book. It offers templates, which I find very helpful, and examples of case conceptualizations based on different theoretical models. Of course, places like the American Counseling Association has a bunch of different approaches for case conceptualization listed in their website. Check out Simple Practice. Yay, Simple Practice. I use Simple Practice for my managing my clients. It's a great resource. I don't get paid for saying that. I just like them. But they have a blog that gives like lots of tips and tricks and things like that around things like case conceptualization. All right, folks. that was a long episode. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep studying.